Today's lesson is once again on using pronouns correctly, but this is going to be part 2. So this will build off our lesson from a couple days ago. It's exercise number 72, and this exercise is 2 pages long. So keep that in mind as you are looking at the assignment. In our last lesson about pronouns, we learned about subject pronouns. So subject pronouns come before the verb in the sentence because they're part of the subject and not part of the predicate. In these sentences, we'll see that the subject pronoun comes before the verb. So when I told Lucas, it's I. He followed Ian. She called Miranda. It saw the boys. We invited the principal. You met Josie. They asked their parents. So in each of these examples, the word that I've underlined is the subject. So it's the pronoun that comes before the verb in the sentence. As we learned in one of our last lessons, objects come after the verb. So we have direct objects and indirect objects. So the verb is done to the object. So we will see when we reverse these sentences, we're going to put them in the opposite order, that the pronoun will need to change. So if instead of I told Lucas, Lucas does the telling, Lucas told not I, but me. So me would be the object pronoun for I, whereas I is the subject pronoun. Now, if we have Ian doing the following, instead of he followed Ian, Ian followed, not he, Ian followed him. So him is our object pronoun. So for our next example, she called Miranda. If we flip it around, Miranda called her. So the object pronoun for she is her. Our next example, it saw the boys. The boys saw it. It is both a subject and an object pronoun, so it can be used in either place. Instead of we invited the principal invited us. So the subject pronoun is we, the object pronoun is us. You met Josie, Josie met you. This is one of the 2 examples where the subject pronoun and the object pronoun are the same. The last example, they asked their parents, becomes their parents asked them. So them is the object pronoun for they. In some examples, the action word will be followed by a noun and a pronoun. So you'll have to do some work to decide which pronoun is the correct one. So if we break this apart, the constant hammering gave Chris and I, or Chris and me, a headache. So gave is our verb. This is our action word. So everything that comes before it, the constant hammering, is the subject. The who or the what. The constant hammering is the thing that gives the headache. So we need to figure out, is this Chris and I or Chris and me? You can tell just by listening to it and kind of looking with your ear. If we took out Chris and, we could say the constant hammering gave me a headache. We wouldn't say gave I a headache. We would say gave me a headache. So when we just have Chris in there, we still know that it should be me. The constant hammering gave Chris and me a headache. The second way that you know this is correct is this would be a direct, or this would be an object, not a subject. So if we looked at our list, I is the subject, I did this, and me is the object. This was done to me. In part A, they are going to give you a sentence, and I've underlined the subject or the object, but they will have it in italics. They'll have your pronoun in italics, but I've got it underlined. And your job is to identify, is the italicized or underlined word an object or a subject? So the car just missed him. Missed would be our verb, right? So him comes after the verb, which makes it an object. It's also in our list of objects. So you would write object on the line. Now they are going to try to trip you up because we have this example of the last person in the car was she. So was is our verb and she comes after it, but if you remember, she is on our list of subjects, not our list of objects. So that's our first clue that it's a subject. The other thing is, who or what is the sentence about? The sentence is not about the car. The sentence is about she, and that she was the last person in the car. The fact that you could also flip it around and keep it with she tells you it's the subject. She was the last person in the car. In the first example, we couldn't say him just missed the car, right? It would be he just missed the car. So the car is the subject in the first one, and it just missed him. Whereas in this one, she is the subject because she was the last person in the car. So think about those two lists and where that word goes, because it could put the subject at the end and do an unnatural order to your sentence. In part B, they are going to ask you to choose which of the pronouns goes in the blank. So the Sullivans asked Paul and either I or me to come. So we could take out the Paul and, the Sullivans asked me to come, and we could also check who's doing the asking. The Sullivans are doing the asking, so they're the subject. I am, the me is part of the object, and me is the object pronoun, whereas I is the subject pronoun. In the next example, Connor and I or me went cross-country skiing. Once again, we can take out the Connor and to see which one makes sense. I went cross-country skiing or me went cross-country skiing? Well, I went cross-country skiing. We can also see that went is our verb. So who went? I went. So I is in the subject position, and so it should be I and not me. The last section, which is section C, is going to start by giving you a phrase. And so it's not a full sentence, and you have to decide where the pronoun is and whether it is a subject or an object. That's your first step. So Michael Murasaki and me. Well, Michael Murasaki is a proper noun, it's his name, and me. Me is the pronoun. So we need to go, okay, is me a subject or an object? Well, me is in our object list, so it is an object. Then the last part is that we need to write a sentence using this phrase. So if me is an object, this phrase, Michael Murasaki and me, needs to go after the verb so that it's after the action is happening. So we could have something like, Joanna asked Michael Murasaki and me to go skydiving. Now, asked is our verb, and Michael Murasaki and me goes after the verb. It is the object, right? So we couldn't put that Michael Murasaki and me asked Joanna to go skydiving because you couldn't say me asked Joanna to go skydiving. You'd have to say I. So if you were to flip it around, it would have to be Michael Murasaki and I, which would not be the phrase that they had given us. Your fresh grade comment for this lesson is to type one of your sentences from part C into a comment, okay? You may not include exactly what I said about Joanna asking Michael Murasaki and me to go skydiving. You have to get creative and write your own ideas.